Hi, you're listening to The Sociology Show, a podcast about absolutely anything to do with the wonderful world of sociology. Whether you're a teacher, a lecturer, a student, or just taking a passing interest, this podcast will look at a range of issues from social class, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, religion, crime, education, and anything else that sociology has to offer. My name is Matthew Wilkin, and each episode I will speak to someone working in the field of sociology and let them explain all about their own interests, their research, and their experiences. So, put your earphones in, turn the volume up, and let's be sociology geeks together, eh? Hello and welcome to The Sociology Show. The Sociology Show podcast is brought to you in association with Tutor2U Sociology, the exam performance specialist for A-level and GCSE sociology students and teachers. So you can visit their website, which is tutor2u.net/sociology, and there you can pick up revision guides, flashcards, revision videos, and everything else that you need for your A-level or GCSE sociology studies. And so my guest for this episode is Dr Catherine Hakim. And Catherine joined me on the phone. The reason I wanted to talk to Catherine is she's one of my most favourite sociologists to talk and teach within the A-level spec, and she often causes quite a lot of divide and discussion and debate. If you don't know much about Catherine, she talks about the idea of erotic capital. And this is the idea that our appearance and our attractiveness is very, very important. It's important in our jobs and ultimately our success and how well we do in society. Catherine has been accused of being an anti-feminist or going against feminist research, even though she believes that erotic capital can actually be used to your advantage, and that erotic capital is as important for men as it is for women as well. So Catherine was really, really kind enough to give up her time, talk to me on the phone. So apologies, the sound quality isn't brilliant, but it's pretty good. And so without further ado, let's go over to the interview with Dr. Catherine Hakim. Hi, Catherine, it's Matthew.
Oh, hello.
How are you?
Fine, thanks. How are you?
Great, thank you. Thank you very much for joining me, coming on the show. I really, really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
So, firstly, are you happy to go straight into the questions?
Yes.
Great. For those that perhaps don't know too much about your work, Catherine, do you want to start by telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Okay, one of the things that I think is really quite distinctive about the work that I do is that I have, throughout my career, been a full-time researcher. And the vast majority of social scientists end up spending most of their time, most of their career, either as academics or as doing something completely different, and they don't publish. Whereas I've been really, really fortunate in spending all my career as a full-time researcher, which has also meant that I've been able to publish a great deal of work, but without the constraint of being limited to the sort of material that is demanded by teaching, shall we say, so that it's been very much a great variety of different kinds of research that I've done. And unlike most people, I have used virtually every kind of research study that is available to social scientists and sociologists. My first job was in the Population Census Office, where it was a newly created post, a new role, to advertise census statistics to researchers in local government, in universities, in commerce, and make them aware of the potential of the census statistics for the work they were doing. And then I moved to head a research team in the Department of Employment, where I was mounting research projects, both small and, in some cases, huge, running into millions of pounds, and 4 or 5 years of work on a whole variety of labour market topics, including unemployment, women's employment, small firms, self-employment. And I also did the very first ever massive research program on homeworking. I say this because of the rise in homeworking during the COVID-19 situation in 2020. I did the very first study of homeworking and showed that actually the vast majority of home workers were white-collar workers and not manual workers, which was the assumption at that time. And at that time, the Labour government wanted to make homeworking illegal. And so the research that I did made it clear that that was just not a really good idea. And of course now homeworking is going to increase in the future probably due to our friend COVID-19. After that, I moved to the University of Essex as a professor of sociology and director of the Data Archive, which again was a research job and organising data available to universities and other people. After that, I moved to the London School of Economics, where again I was doing research projects, but more academic ones in that case. And it provided me with the time and space to write my book, Honey Money, which I hope is the main focus here.
Absolutely.
And then after that, I became a professorial research fellow in Civitas, but in practice, I've actually done research for pretty much all of the think tanks in London. So it's been quite a varied career.
I was going to say that is a wide and varied career, certainly. And you mentioned Honey Money. That was the main thing that I wanted to talk to you about. I teach A-level sociology myself, and your name comes up quite a lot, and the students are always really, really fascinated with the research. Before we go into it, one of the questions that students always ask me is, what type of sociologist is Hakim? Is she a feminist? If so, what type of feminist? I was really intrigued to know how you perhaps define yourself, Catherine.
I think of myself as a feminist, but that's not to say that I endorse the kind of academic feminism that is currently entrenched in English universities, not in European universities, but in English universities. A very, very narrow version, radical feminism holds sway in universities. Outside universities, there's a much greater variety of feminisms that are active, that are in play. And one example is the Me Too movement that owes nothing whatsoever to academic feminism, is a completely separate, independent, grassroots movement amongst feminists in the ordinary world, which owes nothing to academic feminism. In a kind of way, it makes academic feminism completely irrelevant. And this is the key point. I think a lot of women regard themselves as feminists who would not endorse the kind of very, very narrow focus academic feminism that is currently dominating the university courses.
So would you perhaps consider yourself more of a liberal feminist as opposed to a radical feminist, perhaps?
Yes.
Yeah. And perhaps we can branch into this a little bit later, but do you think that has become damaging to the feminist movement and that has become quite narrow?
Yes.
Why do you think that's happened, Catherine? Because if you do look at things on social media or Twitter or something like that, it seems to be quite a small minority, but with a very loud voice.
I don't know. It's just not helpful.
So let's explore your book then. So Honey Money, The Power of Erotic Capital. Do you want to tell us a little bit, right from the start, how it all got started, how you got your methodology, collect your data and so on?
Well, that's one of the things about the fact that I have done such a huge variety of research previously. The book covers the research results from pretty well all the research methods and all the research techniques that are available to social scientists, whereas almost all academic sociologists tend to focus on one single particular type of study, either survey analysis or qualitative research or oral history or whatever it is. I published a book on research design, a textbook on research design, which is widely used because I have used pretty much all the research designs and research methods that are available anywhere in the academic community. Survey research, analysis of existing administrative records, qualitative research, experimental studies, and all of these are studies that are covered in the research reviewed in my book on Honey Money. All the big advantage for me on writing the book on erotic capital was that I was able to review the results of all kinds of social science research, from social psychology to political science, sociology, economics, history, everything. And in that respect, the book is quite different from other things that have been written on the topic. For example, Hammermesh's book, Beauty Pays, which simply reviews the research on the economics of beauty and how it impacts on the labour market. And he automatically, in a knee-jerk reaction, says it must be discrimination. And what I show in the book is that it's not discrimination. I mean, we discriminate all the time. The word is abused, really. We discriminate normally. Any intelligent person discriminates throughout their life every single day. You discriminate in favour of good restaurants rather than poor restaurants. You discriminate in favour of shops that give you good service versus poor service. So discrimination is a sign of intelligence. It's not a problem. And he just assumes that if we discriminate in favour of beautiful people, it must be a negative thing and unlawful and unacceptable. What I show in the book is that actually it's a productivity factor, because people who are attractive, it's not just that they have a better life in their private life and in the dating and mating scene. They actually sell more. They are more productive in any job that they do, apart from manual jobs in manufacturing, where a machine doesn't respond to a person being beautiful or not beautiful. But in ordinary life, particularly white-collar work and service work and professional work, we're dealing with other human beings. We're dealing with other people. And there it really matters how you present yourself, how you get along with people, how you interact, whether you're able to create smooth social interaction. That really matters. And it therefore becomes a productivity factor that you just work better, you deliver better results if you're attractive than if you're not attractive. And the key thing is that this applies to men as well as women. And the general pattern has been to focus exclusively on beauty amongst women as if it's a feminist issue, and it isn't. Nobody ever criticizes David Beckham, a footballer, for earning millions from advertising Armani underpants. Nobody ever criticizes an actor like George Clooney from earning millions from advertising coffee. But if a woman did this sort of thing, then she would be criticized for exploiting her erotic capital, for exploiting her beauty, which is superficial and valueless and unimportant. And this is the thing that I've been trying to overcome in my book, this Puritan negativity about women exploiting their attractiveness, whereas we routinely take it for granted that men are allowed to do that and even encouraged to do that and can make millions from doing that, but it's not acceptable for women to do exactly the same thing.
I've always been interested in that objectification argument, that women are objectified more in the media or they're to be looked at, but it does happen for both sexes, doesn't it?
Yes.
And why do you think there is that focus, that there's kind of a blind spot to that in terms of men are also objectified and use their attractiveness or their sexiness to sell products? Why is there that blind spot? Why does that exist?
It's a Puritan morality problem that only exists in North America and Northern Europe. It doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. It doesn't exist in China, in Japan, in the sub-Saharan African countries. It doesn't exist in Indonesia or Thailand. It doesn't exist actually in South America. It's very much a problem of the Puritan, Northern American, Northern European societies. And because we live in those societies, and most social science work is published in English and comes from English-speaking countries, we think it's normal. We think it's routine. In practice, it's really quite deviant and peculiar.
I mean, a lot of people would say that there's more pressure on females in terms of appearance, something like wearing makeup. Would you agree that there is more social pressure in terms of appearance, looks, attractiveness on women than men?
In the past, yes, because in the past, in Europe, women didn't really have access to the labour market. Today, women have access to the labour market on the same basis as men. And as a result, we see a very, very steady increase in pressure on men to look good. At the moment, nowadays, shops are selling clothing and accessories and advertising to men in the same way that they're selling clothing and accessories and advertising to women. Men are starting to use cosmetic surgery on the same level as women. And cosmetics are still currently not acceptable for men in the Western world. But if you look at African societies and other pre-industrial societies, men used face makeup and face colouring even more than women did. In the past, it was actually more common for men to engage in beautification projects. And for example, but they were different, of course, from the ones used by women, because men would go in for body tattoos all over their bodies and things like that. Or they would go in for shaving their hair in particular patterns and so on. So in the past, it was completely traditional for men to expend an enormous amount of effort and sometimes serious physical pain, undergoing serious physical pain for tattoos and other things, to make themselves beautiful. It's just a more recent Western thing, and people treat it as if it was universal when it isn't in fact universal, and is currently changing because women having the same access to the labour market and incomes, independent incomes as men, mean that men have now got to make a lot more effort to make themselves physically attractive and presentable to women than they used to do in the past.
The Sociology Show podcast relies on the kind contributions of sponsorship and donations. If you enjoy the show, then you can help with the hosting costs by donating as little as £5 on the GoFundMe page. Simply visit uk.gofundme.com and search for The Sociology Show. If you can donate, then you will be sent a Sociology Show pen as a small thank you for your continued support of the show.
And so let's explore the erotic capital idea a little bit more then. So are you saying that erotic capital is something that should be empowering rather than oppressive?
I don't like the word empowering. I think it's overused in all sorts of contexts and is pointless. The fact is, in the 21st century, being attractive has become more important than it ever used to be, for a whole host of reasons. One of them is simply digital photography, which means everybody is more visible than they ever used to be. Facebook, Instagram, photos in the newspapers for politicians. Politicians used to be almost invisible people. You only knew their name. Nowadays, we see them on TV and pictures in the press all the time. So being attractive and being presentable has just become more important. The labour market has changed to a white-collar emphasis so that personal presentation has become far more important than it used to be. And also, because we're richer, luxury is now available to more people because societies and individuals and families have more money than they used to have. And beauty is one of the most important and most popular luxuries. We prefer to see a film star who is beautiful or handsome. In the past, film stars were very often not particularly handsome, not particularly beautiful. If you look at really old films, the hero and heroine wasn't necessarily a great, hugely attractive person. Nowadays, they have to be really, really good looking. So this is actually a really new thing, and it's not a question of choice, and it's not a question of society, in quotation marks, being imposing rules on anybody. There is a new situation in which visibility is more ubiquitous than it was in the past, and as a result, good looks matter, and therefore for men and for women, it's become more important to look good. Now, you don't have to comply with that. Everyone can make their choice. Everyone can choose to be as ugly as they want to be. But as the French point out, beauty is, attractiveness anyway, is very largely a question of choice. The most ugly person can still make themselves very attractive by skills of presentation, a good haircut, nice choice of colours that are flattering rather than ugly. So it is very much a question of grooming and presentation, and anyone can make themselves attractive if they choose. Now, they don't have to choose, just as no one is obliged to go to university. No one is obliged to do all sorts of things that improve their prospects in the labour market. If you choose to exploit it, then you will gain the benefit. And my book is simply explaining that this is something that works. And the interesting thing for me when I've been presenting the theory to audiences is that young people understand this and accept it. Older people automatically reject it and dislike it. And men accept it and understand it. And for some reason, women are much less likely to accept it. If you tell a man, this is a key, and this key opens the door, the man will say, wonderful, I'll use the key. You tell a woman that this key is a key that will open doors for you, and a lot of the time they will react by saying, oh dear, is this moral? Is this appropriate? Is this acceptable? They hamstrung themselves. They put themselves in chains that they don't need to put themselves in. They automatically hamper their own freedom of movement, their freedom of choice. They put themselves in prisons that are purely mental, intellectual prisons that do not need to exist.
Do you think that, Catherine, what's actually happening there is that people do understand it? I think we all know that attractive people can do very well in society just because of their appearance, but people don't want to accept that that's the reality. Is that what's really happening? They do understand it, but they don't want to accept it.
No, it's older people who have that reaction.
Right.
Young people don't have that reaction. That's the very interesting thing that I have noticed. And it's European people, particularly Northern European people, who have that reaction. It's not the reaction in Southern Europe. It's not the reaction in the Far East. My book is selling hugely in Spanish-speaking countries and in the Far Eastern countries, especially Korea. It is more criticized, put it that way, in Northern European countries. It's very, very, very divided according to what country and culture you're in. And it's particularly the case that older people automatically reject it.
And I wanted to come on to that because that's the bit that really gets discussion going in my classroom, is the opposition and the criticism you faced. I think you were a guest on Loose Women or something like that. I was showing a clip to my students and there was this kind of opposition there. Why do you think that is, Catherine? Because what you're presenting is a very, very common sense idea. Make your appearance better. If you smarten yourself up, if you're well groomed, etc., you're probably going to do better. I mean, it's logical, it's common sense. Why is there such an opposition to that?
Well, I'm mystified. The only way that I can explain it is that older women have been brought up with this idea that education is the route to success, education is the ladder for social mobility, and they don't like the rules being changed late in their life when they've already made their choices, and they've got used to the idea that it's just qualifications that count. Younger people are very aware that how you look on Instagram, how you look on Facebook, how you look on dating websites, which are the norm for them, is hugely important.
Yeah.
People don't ask the first question of what qualifications do you have. The first question is, what do you look like in your photo? So they're living in the real world. Older people aren't on dating websites to the same extent and are just out of touch and out of date.
What's the biggest sort of opposition or criticisms you faced, Catherine? I bet you've had to defend your work quite strongly at times.
Well, people just not wanting to believe that it's true. They claimed that it's an opinion and refused to see that actually it's a conclusion drawn from very solid research evidence from all the social sciences. There are an awful lot of people who just want to pretend it's an opinion rather than solid social science fact.
And that goes back to why I asked how you defined yourself at the beginning, because have people questioned your feminism, if you like, because of what you've said about appearance and attraction?
People, and this is not just on the Honey Money book, people have regularly said, you cannot possibly fault Catherine Hakim on the evidence. I just don't like her conclusions.
Yes, I think that's the crux of it, really, isn't it? They just don't like the conclusions as opposed to the actual construction of the findings and the methodology. Exactly. Yeah.
No one has ever questioned my methods or my research evidence. They simply, frequently, not just on this topic but on other topics, don't like the conclusions because they would prefer to believe something different. And that's why I call myself a pioneering social scientist. I have regularly addressed questions that I had a clear view beforehand what the expected result of the research would be, and I found that I was wrong, and I accepted that I was wrong, and the research evidence went the other way. So I'm able to accept that the research evidence doesn't necessarily support my prejudices or my biases or my preferences. And most social scientists, and that includes all the academics that I know, are unable to accept conclusions that go against their preferences, their bias, and their desires for what the world should be like as opposed to how the world actually is.
So to go back to something you mentioned earlier, Catherine, I'm just wondering, as humans, particularly in UK society, should we be less worried about education, £9,000 a year university courses, and actually injecting more energy and time into our appearance and our physical outlook? Will that ultimately give us more happiness and possibly higher success?
Well, there's the example of Kim Kardashian, who, according to the latest reports I've read in the papers, is apparently now not just a millionaire, but a billionaire. And nobody is saying that she spent an awful lot of time getting doctorates. And apparently, as far as I understand it from the press, pretty much the rest of her family has made fortunes, millions, and in some cases billions, from appearing in adverts and modelling and selling cosmetics and God knows what else. So the world is changing, but there is a resistance from people who have invested everything in education. If you look at the research results that actually look at and try and measure very precisely what is the relative value for success in life of qualifications, education versus looks, they're of the same value. And the reason we have overestimated the impact of educational qualifications is because all of these studies have ignored the impact of IQ on its own. And an awful lot of people are very, very clever, have high IQ, but they don't have education. And so the studies invariably lump together the impact of IQ and cleverness with the impact of education. And therefore we gave education a much higher weight in success than it actually really has. So if you extract the impact of IQ in the studies that have measured IQ separately, and there are very few of those, which I review in the book, if you extract the impact of IQ and simply look at the impact of educational qualifications versus good looks, they're of equal value for success in life. And of course, the thing that has most impact is IQ. And the one thing you can say about Kim Kardashian is that she clearly is a very clever woman. So she has worked it out how to monetize her looks, how to monetize her erotic capital, to make money out of it, just as other members of her family have also done the same thing. Part of what we're seeing there is not just the impact of their looks, but actually the way they have used their cleverness, their intelligence, their IQ to monetize these things. Whereas most people who are good looking think immediately, oh, I shouldn't do that. It's not really proper. Its looks are just shallow and unimportant, so I really shouldn't bother.
Well, that brings it exactly to the debate that I had with a group of students myself. And we were particularly talking about females, whether attractive females should monetize their appearance. And the class was quite divided. A lot of people said no, because you're sort of playing into the patriarchy and you're devaluing females just to look at their appearance. And others who also claim to be feminists themselves said, well, no, go for it. If you can make money out of it, absolutely use it to your advantage. So I just wondered where you kind of stood on that argument.
Well, the key thing is, why is it nobody is asking those questions when George Clooney makes millions from monetizing his good looks, when David Beckham monetizes his good looks to make millions? These people have become really wealthy, not because they have doctorates, but because they know how to monetize their good looks. And nobody questions it when a man does it. The only time that people question it is when a woman does it, and that's why I say that it's a patriarchal perspective that says women should never, ever make money, monetize, or derive power from their good looks. And this is a male patriarchal attitude and perspective, and most women in the Western world, unfortunately, have swallowed it and do not know how to begin to challenge it. I'm really sorry about that. I'm really depressed about the fact that they are so gullible.
That's really interesting. I liked what you said there, because I'm just thinking, if you said to a man in an interview, you should get a sharp haircut, smart suit, well-fitted suit, and so on, I think they would take that on as advice, wouldn't they? But if you said to a woman, wear the right dress, get your hair done, wear the right makeup, that would perhaps be seen as an insult.
Exactly.
Why is that? Why would that be seen as insulting when it's the same advice?
Well, that's why I say it's a patriarchal perspective. Men don't like women to monetize anything that they have and can do. It doesn't matter whether it's good looks or the ability to have children or the ability to make surrogate babies or anything else. Patriarchal men don't like women to have any special sources of power or wealth. And so they have invented theories that limit and constrain and demonize even women who actually derive benefits from their particular skills and talents or abilities or whatever. It's a patriarchal thing.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you. I was just looking, is it at least sort of 10 years since the book now?
Yes.
Yeah. I just wondered if it's still as relevant as ever and you're still getting a lot of interest in the book. You said it's gone far and wide and selling in other countries as well.
Well, it's been translated into 12 languages.
Wow.
It's selling very well indeed, outside England, I have to say. And it's just interesting that this patriarchal perspective is so dominant in the Puritan countries of English-speaking Britain and North America, but also Northern European countries generally, that there is more resistance to the whole perspective presented in the book, whereas outside these cultures, it's understood, it's accepted, and is very popular indeed. And I find it really depressing that English-speaking people have been so blinkered in their perspective and response.
I was about to use the same expression about blinkeredness. I think people do accept it and they do understand it, but they don't want to, and the blinkers are on. I think that's a very good way of putting it, certainly. Catherine, could I just ask you, if people want to read it, perhaps they want to find out a little bit more or even purchase the book, how could they go about doing that?
Well, the book is available on Amazon. It's available in paperback. I can't remember exactly how much it costs, but there's ebooks of it available, and I don't think it's more than £10 or £12 in the paperback version. So it is readily available in bookshops and more easily nowadays on Amazon, since bookshops and so many other shops have been completely closed for so long.
Well, Catherine, thank you so much for your time today and giving up some time to do the interview. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye then.
The Sociology Show podcast relies on the kind contributions of sponsorship and donations. If you enjoy the show, then you can help with the hosting costs by donating as little as £5 on the GoFundMe page. Simply visit uk.gofundme.com and search for The Sociology Show. If you can donate, then you will be sent a Sociology Show pen as a small thank you for your continued support of the show.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to the podcast. If you would like to contact the show or be interviewed, then please email the sociologyshowpodcast@gmail.com.